Well, hey there, welcome to my kitchen garden. It is September. You can feel the chill in the air up here in the Chicago area, and I want to show you everything that's growing inside my kitchen garden. It's been such a fun season here in the garden, and it's kind of, it's going to be changing over the next few months. So I want to make sure you get to see everything that's growing right now. Let's take a tour of my kitchen garden. We're gonna get started first in the front pollinator garden. This, I have to say, has probably become my favorite part of the whole thing, and it's kind of ironic because it's not even in raised beds or anything. So this space, as you can see, is overflowing right now with zinnias. If you've been following our journey throughout the summer, you've literally seen these things go from nothing to nearly my height. This space has been covered every day with monarchs and even hummingbirds. Some of my neighbors were here on the front of my property, and my neighbors have come over and been like, please give us some of those seeds because these flowers are magical. So there's actually other things growing here in the pollinator garden, but at this point of the season, all you can really see from the street are these crazy tall zinnias, and they've just been so prolific, and I honestly kind of stopped harvesting from them a couple of weeks ago. I've just let them go. The lemon balm is still here. I've trimmed this back several times because it keeps going, flowering and going to seed. And you can see every time I trim back the stems that are flowering, I get this new vibrant green growth. So that's been awesome. The anise hyssop has continued to produce lots of flower heads. I'm gonna make tons of tea with that anise hyssop. I've got cilantro here that's gone to seed, is now coriander. And you can see all this dill here as well that's producing seed. So I've got lots of things going to seed, tons of zinnias, and what else do I have? Oh, lots and lots of basil. So hidden inside of the zinnias, let me see if I can show it to you. Maybe we'll come over here. Hidden inside of these zinnias are actually rows of basil. So can you see this here? So I kind of come in here and cut from this basil probably 2 or 3 times a week at least. And this has been so fun. I think probably the basil has ended up not getting quite enough sunshine, but we've gotten tons of production from this. So that's what's happening in the pollinator garden. I think my zinnias probably have, I don't know, a few more weeks left to go. I'm gonna see if I can save seed from most of these flowers. That's my goal, is to have enough seed to share with friends and maybe some of you, and to keep this bed full of zinnias for next year. All these zinnias were planted by seed, so that's a really fun thing to see, is just how prolific a garden can be when you start it from seed rather than plants. All right, that's the pollinator garden. Let's move to the front 2 beds of the kitchen garden. Here we go. All right, these front 2 beds, I have to say I pay the most attention to these because they're the first ones I hit every time I walk into the space. They're the most obvious for photos and for neighbors passing by. So they get the most attention, so they're the prettiest. You're gonna see that as we go through. I love Swiss chard, you guys know that, and the Swiss chard has finally hit gargantuan size. Let me cut a piece just to show you. This Swiss chard was started from seed as well. I have both Bright Light Swiss chard in here and Ford Hook. So I believe most of this green is Ford Hook, and I've ended up with a ton of it because I just came in here probably in March or April and planted seed straight in a line. And you can see they're just overflowing. I do have a little bit of Bright Lights here. This is the orange variety. Do you guys hear that crunchy sound? Isn't it awesome? So I have Bright Lights here and here. I have the orange and the red, and they've just been so beautiful and productive. In fact, I need to do a huge harvest and actually make something with them. I usually do like sauteed greens or Swiss chard lasagna, but I was thinking the other day, I'm like, I need a cookbook with like 500 recipes with Swiss chard. These are coral zinnias. These are the one zinnia plant that I planted from a plant. And I have them on this corner and on this corner. I don't know, we'll focus on these later, but they've just been so prolific. If you would believe it, those are blooms from just one plant. All right, then we have our famous cherry tomato arch. So these have done really well. I am about to pull these out. I added up, they've been in this garden for 4 months, so it's time for them to go. We've had so many harvests from these plants, and I just pulled a ton of tomatoes yesterday. I pulled both green and red because today we're actually going to pull these out of the space. But they've been super productive, covered the top, and it's just been a really fun season with the cherry tomatoes. If you've missed the series on cherry tomatoes, make sure you find them here on our page, because we walk you through the step-by-step to grow tomatoes on an arch trellis. All right, and then back here we've got peppers. So I've been harvesting peppers from these huge prolific plants. I just did a major harvest the other day, and we have about 3 or 4 plants on each side. Let me see if I can show you these few peppers here. So there have been all kinds of varieties. I like to grow smaller peppers. I find more success with those. And these are probably going to come out of the garden because I'm going to be transitioning to fall plants, but they've been super productive as well. And then of course on the corners we've got calendula back here and chives and some Thai basil, and so it all kind of comes together. But most of these plants are kind of coming to the end of their season at this point, especially the peppers and the tomatoes. Let's move on to the middle 2 beds. Here we go. All right, so in these 2 beds, we've had so much fun this year. So if you go back to way back in the spring, we were growing tons of lettuces in here. And then if you follow along on our channel, we added these 6 obelisk trellises. Well, hello, sunflower. We added these 6 obelisk trellises to grow cucumbers. And we had a prolific summer. We actually planted them right around July 4th. We had over, I guess 2.5 months of growing cucumbers in this space, and I just ripped them all out. So all these trellises are just about ready to come out. We had these sunflowers I planted from plants around July as well. Had lots of great blooms from them, but I think these are done too. As you can see, they're all kind of in the seed production phase. The peppers are still holding on. What you'll find when you grow peppers is when they hit the 120 day period in a garden, they really start pumping out the peppers. So I always find fall is one of the great times for pepper production. I don't know why, but they just finally turn it on, kind of like after the tomatoes have finished, which is interesting. You're like, can you guys get your party together? You know what I'm saying? This is Lucy. If you haven't been following along our story with Lucy, today we are going to be pulling her from the garden. But she has been doing an incredible job growing seed, and it's been hard to pull her out because look, she keeps making new flower buds with new seeds. So you're like, do I stop her mid seed production? I don't know. But look at this craziness. She's already having her babies. So if you see all these little, what are these little seedlings here in the garden? These are from seeds that have dropped from Lucy and fallen into the bed, and she's already having her babies. She's only like 6 months old plant. So pretty crazy. So we'll pull out Lucy today. Basil's still producing. I've been super lazy with deadheading my calendula. So the blooms are kind of coming to an end, but I'm gonna cut all these and see if we can get some more blooms, because calendula actually likes cool weather. Finally, we have our black cherry plant that I just threw in here last minute, and it's also kind of coming to the end of its life. You can tell that when you look at the leaves of a tomato plant and they start to age either with disease or pests, usually that's a sign that the plant's just kind of tired. It's past its optimal growing period. And you can see this plant still is full of lots of fruit, but it's kind of past the optimal time. So this isn't quite a fully ripe black cherry, but you can see how dark the color is. I love this variety. I just put it in the garden a little too late. All right, so that's about all that's going on in these 2 beds. I have a little bit of trailing nasturtium here that I'll probably keep as we transition to fall, but most of the rest of this stuff is gonna come out along with the trellises, and we'll move this to a lettuce bed. All right, back to beds, let's go. All right, I like to call these the fail beds because they were kind of a fail this year, I have to say. Now, it's been interesting to kind of study because these two beds are actually, they get the least amount of sunlight of all of my garden. So most sun in the front, especially the front two beds in my pollinator garden, and my neighbor's home is here. So what happens as the sun comes up, this is like, these are the last two corners of the garden to get sunlight and then the first to be shaded. So perhaps that's the reason for the fail. It's a good thing to take note of. Probably next year or even as we move forward, I'll be planting things, low-lying things like leafy greens and lettuces, focusing on those rather than fruiting plants. Also, an interesting thing in this space, I am getting into some sun. That's ironic, right? Is it better if I go here? Either way. So a funny thing that's happening in this bed, we had rabbits born in the middle two beds just like a couple weeks ago. And a rabbit is definitely living in the space right now and eating from the garden. So if you see here on this Swiss chard, how the pieces have been munched off. So that's not from me, that's from a rabbit. And she is just kind of coming in here and helping herself to whatever. So I'll show you some beets, but she has, let's see if I can show you one. So I had beets growing in these spaces, and I don't know if you can see, but the greens for the beets are totally eaten off, and that's because of the rabbits. You can see it's just all munched down. So why the rabbit is not coming into other parts of the garden, I don't know, but she's just kind of having her feast back here. We do have some fun little pepper plants. You can see these crazy peppers have been a fun addition, but these are actually spicier than I anticipated. And I'm not great with spice. So they're crazy looking, but they're not necessarily, you know, we're not using them as much in the kitchen. Back here I have brandywine tomatoes. So I put the larger tomatoes back here, mostly because of aesthetics, because I love the cherry tomatoes in the front. But knowing now and really paying attention to the sunlight in my garden, I realized that was a mistake because the big tomatoes really need a ton of sunshine to ripen. And these beauties have just literally taken forever to turn. So you can see these are just starting to blush a little bit, and I have some disease on the leaves and things like that. So like I said, in general, these beds have been somewhat of a fail and disappointment. But you know, lesson learned. I like to say no such thing as a failure, it's just an experience. So back here I do have two eggplants, and this one is finally starting to produce a little bit more fruit. They've been really slow to produce as well. I would say I would put eggplants and peppers in the same category in the sense that they really start to push production after 90 days instead of at the 60, 75 day mark. So you can see all these flowers, like this is really starting to pump out flowers for new fruit in all these little sections of the plant. But these plants have been in the ground since May. So June, July, August, we're at 4 months at this point. So 120 days. And these were planted by plant, not by seed. So even when I put them in the ground, they were probably 30-day plants. So it just shows you the length of time these plants need to really start to pump out production in an organic place with, you know, say not as necessarily optimal sunshine. So I'm in a dilemma. Do I pull these eggplants because they're just about to finally do something? But we're in September, so it's not super hot. And as you can see, we're not getting loads of sunshine back here. So, so that's the back. These are my fail beds, and I'm just chalking it up to good lessons learned. And you know, the good thing is they're at the back, so nobody really notices them anyway. Except one caveat right here is my kitchen window. So every time I'm in the kitchen doing the dishes, cooking, whatever, which is a lot, by the way, most times, I'm seeing the fail beds instead of the pretty ones. So I'm thinking next year or even this fall, I need to prioritize these beds because I see them all the time. All right, that's the end of the September tour of the kitchen garden. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you've learned some lessons alongside of mine, and that you take heart, because you win some, you lose some, but at the end of the day, it's just a great way to grow yourself. I've learned so much in the garden this month, and I'm sure you have too. Thanks so much for watching the Gardenary channel. Be sure to take the green thumb quiz. This is our fun, simple simple quiz that asks you a few questions to help you discover your own green thumb in the garden. We'll ask you a few questions, help you figure out your level of gardening, and then we'll give you free resources to help you grow to the next one. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.